Well, Mountaineer Nation can hear country roads again after a men's basketball game. And it's not really been all that long of a while, but maybe it feels like that after the really bad loss, of course, to Monmouth. But West Virginia does win on this night, beating Jacksonville State 70-57 at the Coliseum. And the Mountaineers now 2-1 on the year. This is your WVU basketball postgame show. Mike Asti and I will be joined in a moment by our Ethan Bock from the Coliseum to talk about this game, talk about the last game, talk about what was different, because there was a decent amount different, even schematically, for the Mountaineers, and then what's to come, and if this game foreshadows anything that's actually better for this team from kind of the cobwebs of the last one. So that will bring on our Ethan Bock there from the WVU Coliseum. And West Virginia did get the win here, 70-57. So, Ethan, West Virginia got this win, and the score shows they won this comfortably. But before we kind of go to the loss to Monmouth and what was different and going to the future and even unpacking and dissecting this game, what does that score show about the game? And the reason why I'm asking that, Jacksonville State at one point went on a 10-0 run. They looked like they were getting back in this game. West Virginia did have a comfortable lead in the first half, but then that kind of looked like maybe it was quietly, dissipating itself. And then West Virginia eventually pulled away. But despite playing a lot better and the coaching staff feeling comfortable with how they played, and they do get a 13-point win, but they do it against a team that lost to Utah Tech. So it's not like they're facing a world beater here. And like even in comparison to the first win of the season when they were facing a dark horse potential tournament team in their conference, not the case here with Jacksonville State. And they also kind of almost let this game get away from them, even though they eventually won. I'm not going to say big, but comfortably in this matchup.
Yeah, West Virginia definitely won the game in the final 5 minutes of the first half. They played their best basketball, hit 6 straight shots, something you couldn't say the first 2 games. And then just coming out of the half, they just had the same energy, kept that run going. And then Jacksonville State eventually started pressuring them full court,
Okay.
created a bunch of turnovers, and then it was a little span of time. But then West Virginia is just able to beat the press every possession towards the end of the game and win comfortably by 13.
What was it that caused Jacksonville State to be able to cause turnovers and kind of cause some havoc there briefly in that second half? Was it just maybe the West Virginia just off of subbing and maybe being tired from how they were playing earlier, kind of let it get away from them briefly? Or did Jacksonville State change something up? Because when you're pressing, as you know, obviously you can't do that for an entire game, even press Virginia back in the day during those successful years of Mountaineer basketball. That was a rarity. Like normally you can't, that's why they haven't done it since. Normally you can't do that for a full game. But during that spurt, it worked out. And then what? They just couldn't continue with it, or?
Yeah, Jacksonville State midway through the second half started pressing, and it seemed like West Virginia was a little caught off guard
Okay.
with the full court pressure, and where guys just didn't know where to be, and it resulted in some easy baskets. But then at the same time, Jacksonville State had a guy in the back, and then they trapped in a corner. There was a couple turnovers that led to some points. So West Virginia was just able to, over time in the second half, comfortably beat the press, get easy corner threes, get easy dunks. And they were able to just pull away with it.
Ethan Bock from the Coliseum. West Virginia does win this one 70-57 over Jacksonville State. Wonder if Rich Rodriguez was watching somewhere kind of torn. Wonder who he was rooting for. His current school, as he is the coach of the Jacksonville Gamecock football team, who maybe is going to play in a bowl game as well if they get lucky and have some loopholes fall in their lap, or his former team of the West Virginia Mountaineers. But in all seriousness, the Mountaineers do win this. They do win it comfortably. They get a solid win. They get a win they had to get, obviously, and now 2-1 on the season. They win it 70-57. And Ethan's game recap and the rest of our coverage is over there at WV Sports Now. But there maybe was a lack of excitement entering this game. I definitely noticed that from the fan base. Even really during this game, it wasn't as easy to find much conversation on social media, even that you did see during Monmouth, and that was before they eventually started losing. I mean, that was a game people thought was a bye game. You were going to win easily, and obviously they lost. But there was somewhat excitement because of the prior win, and okay, it's a new team, new season. Seemed like that totally dropped off. So before I get even further, it actually reminds me, like, what was the atmosphere at the Coliseum, and do you kind of notice any of that? Was there any angst or nervousness during that 10-0 run or any point of this game? Because, yeah, they won by 13, but losing a bye game, even with an interim coach and a roster that had upheaval and drama, is certainly below the standard of the Mountaineer program. So it almost felt like fans were kind of not interested in this game, at least on social media. What was the case at the Coliseum?
Yeah, I would say it was a similar case at the Coliseum in person as well. Atmosphere was pretty low. Obviously, students showed up, but just overall, not all 14,000 were here tonight at the
Right.
Coliseum, and I think it was just a cautious vibe after losing to Monmouth, which will end up being a quad four loss. So
Yeah.
it just a lot of unknown, and I think tonight's win eases the fan base a little bit. They can get back into it slowly as they play SMU next Monday. So, but even with like Bob Huggins in the house tonight, a
Yeah, he
couple
was
former
there.
players,
Yeah.
it still wasn't. It was a November atmosphere. It was nothing out of the ordinary, but you could tell the fan base was a little worn out from Friday night for sure.
Yeah, and it wasn't even like Friday night. Like Friday night going into the game, there was a little bit of a vibe of somewhat excitement, but yeah, not the case for this one. And looking at the numbers here, the team obviously played well in this game, 50%, 51% actually field goal wise, three-pointers 42%, free throws 64. Obviously that could be better, but rebounds, they actually won the rebounding battle, 33-32. That could even be higher, but they did win the rebounding battle. And again, the depleted roster, not too many bigs outside Jesse Edwards. He's the rebounder. And obviously we'll get to Kobe Johnson, his big night and his scoring touch in this game. They won the block battle. They did have more turnovers, but it wasn't gaudy. It wasn't out of control. So overall numbers wise, a better night for the Mountaineers. Now, schematically, from Monmouth to this game, what changed? Because I know Eilert talked about the 2-3 zone. That was evident to anybody watching. Like, that was different. And that sounds like something that maybe he's figured out could work for this team, especially while they have a depleted roster. And it sounds like we're going to see now more of. Is that what maybe they did schematically to change from the Monmouth loss to this one? They had days to work on things. Did you notice anything else? Is that something that you like seeing and want to see carry on? What do you think brought that on in this game?
Yeah, I think the 2-3 defense was huge tonight. Definitely helped the guys rest, not play man to man defense, running around all over the floor on one side of the ball. But I think and Jacksonville State had guys that they could shoot them out of the 2-3 zone. Monmouth would have done the same thing if they played 2-3 zone just as much on Friday
Okay.
night.
Yeah.
But I think just the pace of the game. I think the 2-3 zone helped them just to have better transition on offense. And Kobe Johnson's, you could tell a clear difference between Friday night and then tonight with pace of the game. The West Virginia's offense played way more quicker. That was because of Kobe. So I
Yeah.
think just the 2-3 defense, transition play, points in the paint, and then just the pace of the game was the biggest difference from Monmouth to Jacksonville State.
And even going to Missouri State, only 3 players in a double digits in scoring in that game. And this one, you get 4 and comfortably 4 for the term of the evening in terms of comfortably. So Harris at 12, Edwards at 14, Edwards again, 14, 6, and 3. So a solid night for him. Again, you could still see a little bit more, but he doesn't have to when you're getting this much offensive production from his teammates. Zielinski 19, and then Kobe Johnson, a career high at 19 that you just mentioned. He had the scoring touch in this game, and they both had 19, him and Zielinski, but it seemed like Kobe Johnson kind of was the show for the evening. So all of that is definitely a positive. Now, Eilert also talked about making some decisions even with the lineup because of analytics for this game. What maybe did he mean by that, and why did he have to get analytic with it against Jacksonville State from the Monmouth game? Like, what did he do in that regard? And is that just for this matchup, or is that part of maybe him alluding to seeing more of the 2-3 zone for the future? Like, is he going to be doing the Huggins thing where he tinkers with his lineup every other game?
I think it was mostly just having a guy like Seth Wilson who can come off as a 6-man role with a spark, score 10 points a game off the bench, hit a couple threes, kind of have that energy off the bench because West Virginia's bench is absolutely thin. So
Right.
having a guy like Seth, like
Yeah.
Ofri Neve, he's a raw freshman with a lot of potential, but he's not going to give you 10 plus points off the bench every night. He's going to get you a lot of glue guy type numbers. But Seth could come off the bench, hit a couple threes, get a run going. So,
Neve's
and of
6
course,
rebounds in this game. I mean, that has to
yeah.
be some. I mean, that right there, even if he doesn't score at all, that's a big number for him.
But of course, when I say Seth is a spark plug, come off the bench,
Yeah.
he doesn't score, he doesn't even attempt
Right.
a shot the whole game.
I
And
am looking
and
at that on the stat sheet as you were talking, and was like, did I miss something with him? Yeah.
yeah, and Eilert alluded to, he told Seth after the game, like, we need you to shoot, like you're our best shooter probably without
Yeah.
Krisha. So
Like, why are you
um,
here otherwise?
yeah, yeah. So Seth coming off the bench, shooting
Yeah.
the ball, obviously didn't do that tonight, but didn't need to. The offense
Yeah.
produced without him shooting. So
Right.
yeah,
But this is a
that was a
game
bit.
though that when you're a player like that though, even like this is a game that he in his mind should have more of a green light to shoot to get hot for future games and get in that touch. Just because he didn't need him to do it doesn't mean that he should be going home thinking, well, no big deal that I didn't fire a shot off. Like
Oh
if
yeah,
you're
for
if
sure.
you're if you're a shooter, you gotta shoot, and it doesn't matter whether it's me defending you or somebody on Jacksonville State or somebody on Duke. You want to like shake the cobwebs off. You don't want to go into
Yeah,
bigger games with an offer in terms of even shot attempts. So
yeah.
yeah,
Seth's been aggressive the whole first week with shooting the ball. It was weird not seeing him
right.
even take one field goal attempt, but yeah, he does need to shoot the ball. That's definitely his positive in his game. So yeah, he should have used a night like tonight to get his confidence up,
Right.
and just not lose that shooter's touch.
Yeah, a rebound and 2 assists. So he did get on the stat sheet, but no shots taken. So maybe dishing out when it could have been him. But yeah, you shooters shoot. So if you're a shooter and you don't shoot, then you you can't miss shots you don't take. So that's just pretty clear. Ethan Bock, Mike Asti here. Ethan from the Coliseum. Mountaineers do win it 70-57, and our coverage over there at WV Sports Now. Now, outside of just the gameplay and the schematic difference, and this was a game that, regardless of what happened in Monmouth, West Virginia was supposed to win this game and win it comfortably, like they did, despite a 10-0 spurt at one point. They won this game, and they were clearly the better team. Granted, many felt that way going into Monmouth too, and that obviously didn't work out. But Eilert talked a lot about how this was an important game, and it wasn't a buy game necessarily as much of a buy-in game. That was his quote after this win. And this was a game, all the cliches could be used. It galvanized the team. He feels like there's chemistry there. The team loves playing together. He's seeing that more in the guys, even from the Monmouth loss to this one. They didn't lose themselves. They stayed together. They worked on things, and they wanted to get this win. It was an important game from that chemistry perspective, even though they also need to continue to build that. So what did you see in the regard of the team fighting through a bad loss to get them this win, how they looked on the floor, even if there's a team leader that's emerging, because it doesn't have to be the best player. We always talk about that every year of who's the team leader. Usually it's obvious. It's one of 2 guys that are legit stars. This team doesn't really have that outside of Jesse Edwards and when Kirk Krisha comes back, but he's not there. And Jesse Edwards, if he's not a vocal leader, is somebody else emerging to kind of be the Eric Stevenson of this team, especially before they get players back from suspension or waivers or whatever else. Are you seeing any of that kind of emerge? And maybe what did Eilert mean by that? And what else was he talking about in the press conference in terms of getting the team together and buying in with this victory?
Yeah, I think for sure this team showed way more team chemistry tonight than they did the first 2 games. You could see over time that it's starting to develop, and I think Jesse Edwards, for them playing a 2-3 zone while he's played at Syracuse under Jim Boeheim for 4 seasons, it's a no-brainer. They should be playing a 2-3 zone majority of the game.
Yeah,
because put him in the paint, and he can teach these guys how to play a 2-3 zone. Never played it under Bob Huggins or wherever else they've been at.
right.
I think vocally, I think Quinn Slazinski and Josiah Harris have been so far your loudest on the floor. Kobe Johnson's a conservative, quiet player.
Yeah.
And that's just his personality. And same with Jesse Edwards. But I think
Right.
I think the team builds off of Slazinski and Josiah Harris, just especially vocally on defense, and then just where to be on the offensive end of the ball.
Speaking of Edwards, how would you evaluate his game? Because we talked prior this season in the couple games that have been played that he was good, sometimes even great, but he can be more aggressive and even be better. And with a depleted roster, they even need more from him. This was a game they probably were going to win with even his C+ effort because of the opponent, but they're going to have the back air brawl coming up. It's not too far away now, and Pitt is playing really well. We were talking off the air. Pitt, even when they end up in the tournament like they were last year, they never start out a season strong. They're starting out this season very, very strong. So with that being the case, how has Edwards played? How did he play in this game? And what does he need to do to win games like that coming up against Pitt and beyond?
I think Jesse's been playing his butt off, really.
Okay.
I mean, going into this game, he played 38 minutes a game the first 2 nights. It's not going to show on the stat line, but he's only attempting 6 shots a game for the most part. The biggest thing is just it's his teammates getting him the ball in the post, and as soon as he catches the ball in the post, here come 2-3 defenders because they're going to let WVU shoot. First 2 games they've shown 35%, 30% from the field as a team. So let these perimeter guys shoot it. Let Kobe Johnson, let Josiah Harris shoot it. And they had a good night shooting from the perimeter, both of those guys. So but just getting Jesse Edwards more attempts in the post, but then the difficulty is him getting doubled and triple teamed, so then he has to go pass it out. So it's hard to criticize Edwards for his, I guess, lackluster stat line so far. It's just he's not getting as many attempts as he should be.
Probably also worried about foul trouble too. If he gets too aggressive, then he's going to really ruin the team because especially with a cookout, they don't really have anyone to go to if he would foul out of a game.
Yeah, going into this game, Kobe Johnson, Seth Wilson, Quinn Slazinski were used more in possessions than Edwards was. It's not really on him. It's more so the defense's game planning against him.
Right, which you would think that especially with this roster, again, waiting for suspension, waiting for maybe waiver, etc., especially with this current roster as we're speaking on November 14th, the scheme to face the Mountaineers is probably pretty simple. You try to get Edwards into foul trouble, and you try to probably hope that Kobe Johnson and Slazinski are not having hot shooting nights. You get hands in their face. And if they happen to be cold and they're not hitting shots, then you just bang up Jesse Edwards and get him maybe mentally out of the game, cause some foul trouble. And then if any of those things happen, you probably got a victory against West Virginia right now, because again, they have 8 players basically who are their crew, and it's a depleted roster. Ethan Bock, Mike Asti here, WV Sports now. The Mountaineers do win this one, and they do get the second win of the season, the second one for interim head coach Josh Eilert as the leader of the Mountaineers. And they do have that one real bad loss, but much better showing in this one. Was anything else said in the post-game pressers, whether it be from Eilert or any of the players, in terms of how they played in this game or even picking up themselves from the loss at Monmouth? Because it was such a – I don't know if any of those kids even realized the magnitude of it, that – yes, bye losses are going to happen. I mean, I think what maybe a little bit I noticed calm down Mountaineer Nation, who were irate that night, even knowing the roster, knowing the drama in the situation, is we saw other upsets from just as historic, even more elite programs that also had really bad losses after that. This has been a year of upset losses, whether it be men's or even women's. So, I mean, LSU has lost the game on the women's side. So, upsets like that happen, even though they make no sense. Basketball is different than football. Like Michigan losing Appalachian State a decade plus ago is going to be replayed for hundreds of years and never happen to the Wolverines ever again. In basketball, those upsets happen every year, and there are programs that lose a bye game and then go to the Final Four. So it's not a backbreaker like it would be in football. With all that said, though, it was covered nationally. The NCAA was putting it up on their social media. They weren't saying asterisk interim head coach Josh Eilert in a depleted roster. They were saying the West Virginia Mountaineers, which is a program that had Jerry West, Bob Huggins, multiple Final Fours. They've now claimed a national title way back in the day. Sweet 16, Elite Eights. Like, that's the program that now lost this bye game. That's not something that they want to have on the resume. And yet, it didn't seem to mentally affect this team. They did pick themselves up and get this big win. So did they say anything about, like, man, that sucked, but we had to get together? Do you even think that they were aware of the magnitude of that loss in terms of the historical significance and how mad the fan base was about it?
Yeah, a team after the Monmouth loss and tonight, they, especially Szynski and Coach Eilert, they talked about having that heart-to-heart moment after the Monmouth loss. Not good having that after the second game of the season. Usually you have that in conference play. But Szynski mentioned that it was good timing to have it this early into the year and not rather than in February. So
sure,
getting everybody on the same page, and me personally, I was very surprised that they bounced back and won comfortably tonight. I thought Jacksonville State would cover the spread, potentially even steal this game. So the biggest thing from last week is, like
covered
you said,
the spread, but almost.
Yeah, almost covered the spread.
Yeah.
But like you said, nobody's looking at the scenario that West Virginia is in. Nobody's looking at having an interim head coach with 8 scholarship players. No, Monmouth should never come into the Coliseum and just bully West Virginia from start to finish. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what situation their program's in. Having a guy come in to the Coliseum, Xander Rice, and score 30 points on 50% shooting, that never happens. So Quinn Szynski talked about that. He said after Friday, we're not getting bullied ever again, especially by a team like Monmouth, with all due respect. But you mentioned tonight that they took care of business. They didn't let Jacksonville State bully them, and they got the job done.
Yeah, I mean, taking care of business is the phrase. They won comfortably and they took care of business. And it's not like you're going to give, because if we're saying that when you're West Virginia, regardless of everything else that could be a legitimate excuse this year, you still can't get bullied by Monmouth, then we also have to bring up, you can't give West Virginia and that program too many kudos for beating up on Jacksonville State, because who, again, they already had a loss prior, and it was to Utah Tech. And I don't have to say more about that program in terms of overall in college basketball. So they did what they had to do, but now they move on. What do you want to see from them moving on? Because they used the several days to add a new scheme in, to cater more Jesse Edwards, to do different things for this game from the Monmouth loss. They're going to have a lot of time to get together and scheme for the next game. But then once they do that, those games are going to start getting clumped together a little bit. So I guess a long break could be a good thing, or it could be a bad thing. It's been a bad thing for the football team. Well, like, what do you want to see from these games moving forward? And what do you think maybe even is going to happen during this almost week for this team? Like, how often do you think they're going to practice, things like that?
I think it's great for this team to get as much rest as they can. These guys are playing 30 minutes a game, if not 40 almost. So it could be a bad thing, like you said, but the biggest thing to me is they got to invest on this 2-3 defense. I know a lot, like I said, a lot of these guys didn't play it under Huggins. It was very rare to see Huggins ever use a 2-3 defense, but just kind of saving energy, not moving as much around on defense, but at the same time still having a plan. These guys aren't the greatest man-to-man defenders, so you can't get much worse playing a 2-3 defense. So I think just sustaining rest, not having guys run around following another man. You can use man to man, throw off, kind of flip between the two, but I think this team's got a majority in games. Just invest in playing this 2-3 zone because it's working.
At least it worked for this one night, but you'd imagine it's going to keep on working, and it almost makes you think like maybe they should have been doing this all along, especially when you have a player from Syracuse who certainly could teach it to everybody else, and it does make tons of sense that it would be what the Mountaineers should do, and it will also be interesting on how Josh Eilert handles this week and even just different things about the season. It's kind of why I asked like how many days they might even practice, because we kind of knew the Huggins system. Like after Monmouth, they were going to be on the treadmill. He was never going to let him off. But if they would have won this game, he kind of would then give him some leeway. Josh Eilert, this is his for a crack at things. We don't even have colleagues at other markets where he coached before really to ask, like, hey, what does he do? This is his first time being a head coach. He's in charge. And it also seems like maybe this is the first time, even though his second win, maybe putting the 2-3 zone in, something that Huggins would never do, different things like that. And we'll see now with this break and moving on throughout the season. You know, maybe that's the first stamp of Josh Eilert saying that even if it's only for 1 year, this is the Josh Eilert era. Like he is, yeah, Huggins wouldn't do it, but Huggins isn't here. Huggins is not the coach of this team, no matter what some may tell you. And this is the Josh Eilert era. So maybe that was, you know, part of it too. Obviously they did for the game, but maybe that's in the back of his mind. Like, hey, you know, this is my time. If I'm going down, and we're going to have a coaching search in the offseason, and I'm going to be a candidate, but I'm not going to have this job handed to me, I want to make my candidacy and my resume look as good as possible, because the top of my resume is going to be this year as head coach of the Mountaineers, for better or worse. West Virginia does win at 70-57, though, as they do beat Jacksonville State to recuperate from the Monmouth loss, and they are now 2-1 on the season. Games against SMU and then Pitt, etc., coming up there on the slate for West Virginia. They'll have the Brawl at home, at least, but that is not going to be an easy game by any means, and certainly a game that everyone's going to have circled on their calendar, and a game that Pitt can tell you they got in the tournament last year. They had one of their better seasons ever under Capel. You lose to West Virginia, they got to hear smack talk a whole year. So West Virginia fans don't want to have to put up with that no matter how their season ends. I mean, that's a big deal to both programs, even though it's not necessarily the football rivalry. It's still a big one to both schools nonetheless. So, Ethan, we'll be talking to you again, and I'm sure you have a lot of coverage during this break period, because there's maybe going to be some news that could float. I mean, this team's not playing. They got some time. There's some things that could be done that maybe they'll hear back from during this period.
It's been about 3 weeks. NCAA's got to hurry up on this. Yes,
right.
No?
And I see they're making some other decisions that also people were waiting for, that some thought were going to go the other way. So I see some, it appears, having some sense of optimism in terms of the battle waiver. But, you know, when you're trying to appeal something with the NCAA, which is like you're calling the mafia and apologizing, it's, you know, it's a crapshoot. But this feels like this would be the appropriate time, if they're not trying to hurt the team and the kid, to make a decision, because they got about like a week where it would not affect the team. If they wait until once they start playing again, then obviously that's going to be harder to even add somebody to the roster when you get them. So this could be that. Like, even for media, I'm sure you would really appreciate if this is the time, rather than when you're back at the Coliseum before tip-off, which you know is when that's going to go down.
Or Friday night at 9 p.m.
Saturday Friday night 9 p.m., 11 p.m., maybe an hour before kickoff of a football game would probably work. That was another piece of news that happened right before football kickoff. Granted, they couldn't control that one. But, yeah, you just never know. And, you know, we can't pick and choose when news happens covering the Mountaineers, to say the least. But that'll do it for this edition of our WVU basketball postgame show. West Virginia does win it 70-57. And they now are 2-1 on the year. So they do what they have to do. They win comfortably. They take care of business. Everything like that needs said, and it fits this game. But they now got to continue it on throughout the rest of the season.